Log number 46. Day of recording. This is the 6th of September and it's Friday, the end of my working week. So this week was scheduled that I would continue on redesigning chapter 2 compositional reference. And I spent the week doing exactly that. I went back to my Photoshop sort of file that I've done back in November, almost somewhere there. And I had to update all the things that I've learned from all the other 6 designs that I've done recently and really embellish and make it much more up to date than before. So when I went back on Monday, I was staring at it blankly, meaning that I felt that I didn't know what direction I should take. I have been a bit of disconnected lately with the flow of the Stonemason story, given that I had to take a few weeks break, given the traveling and the re-advertisement of flow. So in doing so, I tried to sort of understand again what I'm trying to achieve here. With this gap that I allowed myself to sort of breathe in and the break that I had from it, it really became a reintroduction to my own words that I've been saying for so long and breaking the monotony that a flow of work can create. As everything became quite methodical before without my break, everything sort of slotted itself back to back without me understanding the bigger questions. So I had in my mind that I needed to take it slower, needed to reevaluate this composition, given that I have 3 more compositions to do, and this one included being the second chapter. And these are going to be the biggest designs that I've done that are in the story of the Stonemason's first arc. And they have more space for me to include more detail, but at the same time, they're going to be the beginning that people will interact with to lead them to different compositions. So there's a lot of weight on it, but at the same time, a lot of sort of raw emotions from the story that is being told and what you're seeing in the composition per se, and how you will be interacting with it, and what layers of storytelling will it enable you to understand. So in trying to break the patterns that I sort of fell into before my break, I went back and reread the chapters 2 story that I wrote, and with it I understood a lot of my reasonings, a lot of my perspectives that I had before, and why am I doing this? It sort of was a grounding effect. If anything, I was able to sort of sit down and appreciate the passion that I have and reflect it to how it became and how it is still within me, and the topics that I'm raising that are still very profoundly strong in my own self. And it really was an emotional sort of feeling to go back to it and to read and understand where I started and why am I doing this and who this character is and what am I trying to show in this chapter. So I quite changed the composition quite a bit. I've added different layers of storytelling with it, but at the same time references in future compositions that will be had and the ones that I already did, given that the 6 compositions that I've done is on chapters 3 additional designs, the ones that you will be able to interact. And part of the story and how it evolves, chapter 2 is sort of like done in a much prior time span on what happens in chapter 3. So having references that if one is inclined to sort of understand and see, you will see them appearing very naturally through the compositions and you understanding a form of connectivity. something that I've been quite adamant to achieve is this: everything has to be connected, but at the same time quite distinct. In doing so, I think it allows for the need of a different composition versus having just a slight variation of different sort of visuals. Because not only the composition should be distinct, but at the same time, it should add to the story in a profound way that the reason why you're seeing it is because I'm giving you a more in-depth look on this matter or on this sort of time period that you're going to be exploring. And given that the words of the narrator, the overall sort of story that is going to be told, that is going to merge with the composition, is referring to what the chapters illustrations are showing, I tend to sort of like make it very aligned. But then when you see the composition, when you see the illustration, you see different textures, different metaphorical textures, different sort of elements, layers of storytelling that the narrator didn't pick up on. And that's where you, as a person, as the individual who witnesses it, begins to interact with it and pick out the perspectives that you are able to see. And I quite like that. I quite like the idea how everyone would probably have a very unique experience, but at the same time, fundamental things in the composition will be sort of experienced by everyone. And the more curious you are, the more sort of you want to understand things in a more detailed version, and in a way, you'll find lots to be inspired and sort of taken away from. So it was quite amazing to relive that. I've been quite absent from it for the past, what was it, 4 weeks, 3 weeks. I went on my traveling on the 3rd of August, and I started working on the Stonemason again on the 19th, or was it the 26th? No, it was the 26th. Yeah, because on the 19th I was working on Flow's re-advertisement. Initially, the idea was that I would be able to do the re-advertisement sort of writing as I was traveling, but I have this thing that I'm unable to take away from my current situation, sort of reality, and really force something else into taking its place, because I know it's temporary, right? The slot that I was away from my studio would be temporary, and I could come back and when I go to the studio and do the writing, even though my mind would sort of like narrate it and say what I wanted to say, I wouldn't make the effort into writing it down, which is it's interesting. Usually, I do write things down, but at that point, I didn't want to. Maybe prior to that, when I was traveling before, even the stonemason, and how the stonemason was sort of like born and gave sort of like birth into the theme. I was constantly writing outside. I was living the moment and at the same time living these new thoughts. But given that flow has already existed in my past, it was more painful and more sort of having to recall things rather than move forward in different perspectives that didn't have anything attached to it or tainted in some way. So I think that really played a role in me declining my initial thought of having to do Flow's advertisement on my sort of a week and a half break, and then coming back to the studio and doing all that, which evidently took 2 weeks. As I said in the previous log, it was much more intense, and I needed more of my emotional side and emotional availability to comprehend and really lay it out correctly. And coming back to the stonemason, since Monday, I have a very renewed and rejuvenated way of seeing it. Not because I'm like something drastic has changed, but I think the break that I had allowed me to really contemplate in why am I doing the things that I'm doing, and to which I'm trying to refer this theme, and what points would I want to communicate, and the core of it. and it's very easy to lose the core because things become very methodical. I was going from design to design, and then having to do everything quite sort of in a pattern that allowed for efficiency, but at the same time progressing the skillful part of the drawings. And now that I was able to sort of break from it and obviously go in a different direction of a different composition that is much more larger, much more um, sort of the potential is much more endless. It's it was a beautiful experience, and one that I'm going to keep moving forward with in my mind. And to have this when things get a bit too stale, a break is needed, and a break is needed to change your way of thinking. And there wasn't a day that I wasn't thinking about the stonemason, but there were days that I didn't have to act on it. And I think that's very important, that one can think about something and progress that thought, but the importance of you not having to forcefully act on it, or some way or form to imprint it. It's a bit freeing, if anything, lack for better words, I suppose. And it's always been prevalent in my artwork. The more I take step backs, the more I see the bigger picture, and the more I see myself on why am I doing this, and to why am I doing this is the biggest drive and passion, and sort of the embers that will completely keep on burning until I am long past this, or I've completed this thoroughly, or to my mind's sort of best interest. At the same time as I am progressing through this rekindling and re-understanding of the essence of breaks, I am slowly having to seriously tackle the aspect of marketing, something that I haven't done before. I have never really have had the inclination to do so, but I decided to take a conscious effort in really applying myself in it, which I know that I've been saying quite a long time. I know that's something that I'm struggling with, and I'm sure many people do, but it's something that it's going to keep me moving forward, and keep more the most amount of people that are interested to see and experience this thing, because I'm not doing this just for myself. I think I've said it in one of the logs, the concept of someone saying, "Oh, I'm doing this just for myself," then why share it? Why go online and say what I'm saying now when the intention is for myself, which clearly isn't. The intention is for me to both create this thing for me, but mainly to share it and see how the world perceives it, and see and say the parts that I feel are not being said and not being touched upon. And it's powerful. It's powerful to have the creativity and the ability to say your pain and say whatever is sort of ailing you in an artistic form, whatever the medium. And I see a lot of people who have the ability to sort of understand how they're going through these things, but they don't have the ability to creatively put it in a sequence or in some shape or form, and to sharing it with people and saying, hey, this is what I'm feeling, without having to explain it word by word, which becomes daunting and becomes lackluster, because words can be used in many different ways, but sometimes words are inadequate to what we're feeling and to what we're experiencing. And we sit and we brood, and we're trying to find the words, and we're trying to find everything to do with what we're feeling, but just words don't describe it, or they cannot describe it by themselves or in the way that we normally use words. And we have to create a sequence or something that daily life doesn't allow. And I feel having this passion in any person's life and putting it in some form of aspect or anything, it's essential for people to rekindle both the ability to listen to themselves and how they perceive the world in their minds and how it is in reality. And mainly the stonemason is mainly this, how I created this fictional story based on our history as humans and what we've endured, and my lessons that I've seen people explain to me and narrate, and me as the, let's say, I guess, in a documentary fashion, listen all to that and create a sequence that this thing makes sense, and then put my input into it and say, hey, this thing was happening. This story that I created is fictional, but has elements of humanity, of our desires, of our demons, of our pain, of our loves, of everything that has to do with being a human and being imperfect, which evidently is what I quite love about art, and especially the art that I do. I emphasize how people are just imperfect, and the more imperfect you are, the more value you have in being able to express yourself, because you constantly wish to either better yourself or learn from why you are not perceived better by your own self and by the people around you. There's this endless wish for you becoming better, which I like, and I constantly encourage myself to do and reconsider and analyze in a way that promotes me and myself in becoming whatever I will become. For planning, I think all of this is, it's the biggest injustice, given that if you plan anything, nothing goes according to plan. And talking about planning, um, I wanted to release this first arc on the beginning, sorry, not the beginning, Christmas Day of this year. So in a couple of months now, it's September now. I don't know how realistic that will be, and the more the time approaches that deadline, the more I'm feeling I'm not gonna be able to do it, am I? Not in It doesn't really bother me in a sense that I am missing something out, because I know that the reason why I'm extending things is because I've got a new perspectives, and I'm adding this new sort of detail that I didn't have before, and I'm embellishing it and then making it sort of as best as it can be, given that what I've explained in a couple of vlogs back on how this will be my compass on when I show to people of what is to come ahead, and potentially get some propositions and line up some exhibitions on how to on what is to come, and really show to people the potential of this. So having the first step into this done correctly is quite essential to me. Even if I wanted funding at some point, I can have and say, hey, this is going to be how it's going to be shown, and what my perspective behind this trade will be, and doing this right and in the best of my abilities is quite important. But equally, the more I dwell on these things, the more endless it will become. Because if I would go back to my first design now, I'd be like, of course I could do it better. Obviously, I think with practice and many more designs, you can inevitably make everything you ever did before better. But would it be needed? And would it add anything other to my own ego of having a consistency that reflects to who I am now? Not really. It wouldn't really help. And it's something that I want to keep reminding myself. So I try to only go back to things when I know that I didn't add that extra layer of thing that I could have done, and it's needed. Because some things don't have to all be in the same level. It's nice to see the different levels of the progression of a story or an exhibition or a musical composition or anything. Even though subtle, and even though sometimes you cannot consciously perceive it, unconsciously you do feel the accumulation of things, and it's something that I understood in flow. Even though my last painting that I've created wasn't the last painting in the story, but it was in fact the middle painting in the story, and that I would arguably say it's the best skillful painting that I've ever done in my career so far. But at the same time, it works because that depicts the mind, where the mind is incomprehensibly different to our reality, like how we see things, perceive things, our visuals, or everything. So yeah, I think we're gonna have one of that moment again at some point in the story. But yeah, and by concluding this in this week's sort of work, I'm going to be completely going into the design. I've already made some measurements yesterday and today for having the whole week covered in me drawing, understanding how the design is going to be implemented in this new size. It's 3 times bigger than my A3 designs that I've done before. So there is a bit of how would this sort of go down, which I don't think is going to be very different, but it's still the excitement of something new that needs to be tackled. And every day that is coming towards me, and how everything sort of shapes up, and how life throws things at me, I try my best to be as conscious and as there as possible, and go with how life sort of sways me. At the best of my abilities, at least. You know, the unpredictability of things, and I try every day to just be conscious in progressing this theme, even though sometimes I may be needed in somewhere, and I might not be able to be in my studio, but I'll find ways to always have this stonemason's journey in my mind, and then working on it in different ways, given that it's not just the drawings, it's not just the writing, is the whole world building that needs to be worked on. And yeah, it's been magnificent so far, and theoretically we are towards the sort of, if we were to put a percentage on how far we've gone through the stonemason, I think we're 65% in, and we have a big chunk still, but that chunk is basically the overall conclusion of the arc, sorry. And with it we can then, when that's finished, when the three major designs of the chapters are done, I can really put everything together and see what are missing. And what is missing is nothing that takes more than a day's work to do. So yeah, excited to see how it goes, and if I don't meet the deadline and I have to extend it, that's totally fine. And I'll try and live with it. But regardless, thank you for listening, and being present and updated. I don't know when you guys are going to be listening to this, or at what stage of the development, but there is a new second wind effect that is happening with me right now, that is another, I feel it's another change in the works, meaning that I'm openly changing my patterns once again to allow for creativity and for life to guide me in the finalization of the first arc. So yeah, see you in the next week, and with the thoughts that I will be having.